Welcome back to Bargirl Baddies. Today's story is one of the hardest we've shared on this channel, and I need you to hear me out before you jump to conclusions. This isn't about a bargirl scam or a gold digger or some obvious con that you can spot from a mile away. This is about something more subtle, more painful, and honestly more common than anyone wants to admit. It's about a man who loved his wife so much that his fear of losing her turned him into someone he never thought he'd become. It's about surveillance, suspicion, and the kind of heartbreak that doesn't come with villains, just two people trying to survive their own versions of loneliness. Our storyteller today is Marcus Chen, 34 years old, from Vancouver, Canada, software developer, good job, stable life on paper. Marcus thought he'd found his soulmate in Thailand. He married her, built a life with her, trusted her completely, until he didn't. Until the doubts crept in like fog under a door, and he made a decision that would shatter everything he thought he knew about love and trust and his own moral compass. Marcus installed hidden cameras in his own home to catch his wife cheating. What he found wasn't infidelity. It was something far more complicated, far more human, and it broke him in ways a simple affair never could. This is his story, sent to us in his own words, and I'm telling you right now, before we even begin, you need to comment below where you're watching from. If you've ever felt that creeping doubt in a relationship, if you've ever crossed a line you swore you never would, if you've ever discovered that the truth is messier than any lie you imagined, hit that like button and subscribe. Because Marcus's story is a warning about what happens when love turns into fear and fear turns into control. Let's begin. I'll be honest with you. Before Thailand, I was dying. Not literally, but in that slow, grinding way that nobody notices until you're already gone. I was 33, pulling 80-hour weeks at a Vancouver tech startup, watching the rain streak down my apartment window while I ate microwaved pad thai alone at midnight for the fourth time that week. My entire social life existed in Slack channels and stand-up meetings. My dating life was a graveyard of unmatched Hinge profiles and first dates that felt like job interviews neither of us wanted to be at. I'd wake up at 6, code until my eyes burned, fall asleep watching Netflix shows I wouldn't remember the next day. Rinse and repeat. My stock options might be worth something someday, my manager kept saying. Like that was supposed to fill the hollowness spreading through my chest every time I realised I'd gone 3 days without a real conversation with another human being. My 30s arrived with this hollow thud. No partner. No real friends outside of work. Just this optimization mindset I'd applied to every aspect of my existence until my life looked successful on paper and felt empty everywhere else. I was the guy who had it figured out, according to my parents. The stable one. The smart one who worked in tech and owned a condo in one of the most expensive cities in the world. And I was absolutely miserable. The pivot came on a random Tuesday night. I was doom-scrolling Reddit, which is what you do when you're too tired to sleep and too awake to rest, and I stumbled onto a thread about digital nomad life in Chiang Mai. Guys talking about living in modern condos for a fraction of Vancouver rent, working remotely from cafes, having actual lives outside of work. The math was simple and seductive. My salary could buy a life of genuine comfort in Thailand that would cost triple back home. But underneath the financial logic was something rawer, something I barely wanted to admit to myself. I was lonely. Burnt out, desperate for a reset button on my entire existence. I wanted to be somewhere nobody knew my name or my failures, or the fact that I'd spent my entire adult life becoming exactly the kind of successful, isolated person I used to pity. So I did it. I went remote, told my company I was moving to Thailand for cost of living reasons, and bought a one-way ticket. 3 weeks later, I was standing in Suvarnabhumi airport at 2 in the morning. And the weight of humid air hit me like a wall. It was November, which is supposed to be cool season, but coming from Vancouver drizzle, it felt like stepping into a sauna fully clothed. The airport smelled like jasmine and jet fuel and possibility. Bangkok was chaos, beautiful, overwhelming chaos. The taxi ride to my hotel was a sensory overload, neon signs in Thai script I couldn't read, street food smoke curling up from carts at intersections, the driver's radio playing some bouncing Thai pop song that was somehow both annoying and infectious. I felt completely unmoored from my old life, and for the first time in years, that felt like relief instead of fear. I settled in Chiang Mai after a week of Bangkok overwhelm, rented a modern condo near Nim and Hayman, the kind of place that wouldn't look out of place in Vancouver except it cost a third of the price and came with a pool and a gym I might actually use. I set up my workspace, got my routines sorted, and slowly exhaled for the first time in what felt like forever. The first month was about decompression. I'd work my Vancouver hours, which meant starting in the evening and finishing near dawn, then sleep through the heat of the day and wake up to explore. I'd wander through the old city, eat kar soy from street vendors, sit in Buddhist temples just breathing in the incense and quiet. Nobody knew me. Nobody expected anything from me. I was anonymous in the best possible way. That's when I met Ploy. It was at a cafe near my condo, one of those aesthetically perfect places with hanging plants and pour-over coffee that costs more than it should. I was working on my laptop, debugging some feature that wasn't critical but gave me something to focus on, and she brought over my flat white with this smile that felt genuine instead of customer service automatic. She was 28, I'd later learn, hair pulled back in a neat ponytail, minimal makeup, wearing the cafe's uniform like it was a choice instead of a requirement. When I fumbled through ordering in broken Thai, she laughed, not at me, but with this warmth that made me feel like my attempt mattered even though my tones were definitely wrong. We started talking. Her English was excellent, which she said came from watching too many American shows and studying hospitality management in Bangkok. She asked where I was from, what brought me to Chiang Mai, if I was finding everything okay. Normal questions, but she actually seemed interested in the answers. We talked for maybe 10 minutes before other customers needed her attention, but something shifted in that conversation. I started going to that cafe every day, not in a creepy way, I told myself, just in a routine way. She'd remember my order, we'd chat when she had time, and slowly those chats grew longer. I learned she wasn't just working at the cafe, she was the manager, which explained the confidence. She was also taking online courses toward an MBA, trying to build something bigger for herself. She had ambitions beyond serving coffee to digital nomads, and I respected that immediately. Ploy didn't fit any of the stereotypes I'd half expected and fully dreaded encountering. She didn't ask me for money. She didn't play games or drop hints about sick relatives or broken motorcycles. She treated me like a person instead of a walking ATM with a foreign passport. When I finally worked up the courage to ask her to dinner, she said yes without hesitation, but also insisted on splitting the bill, which both impressed me and made me realize how low my expectations had sunk. Our courtship felt genuine in ways I'd almost forgotten were possible. Weekend trips to Pai, where we stayed in a bamboo bungalow and watched sunrise over the valley. Cooking lessons in her small apartment where she patiently taught me to make somtam while laughing at my inability to handle Thai chilies. Late night conversations on her balcony about family, about dreams, about the specific kind of loneliness that comes from living in a country that's not quite home anymore. She told me about her father passing away when she was 19, about helping support her mother and younger sister, about the pressure she felt to succeed, not just for herself, but for her whole family. I told her about the emptiness of my Vancouver life, about feeling like I'd optimized myself into a corner, about wanting connection more than I'd ever wanted, career success or stock options. I fell in love with the details. The jasmine scent in her hair from the shampoo she bought at the night market, the way she'd squeeze my hand twice quick, deliberate, which I learned was her silent way of saying, "I'm here, I see you." The sunrise we watched from Doi Suthep after hiking up before dawn, when she first said she loved me in Thai and then again in English, like she wanted to make sure I understood in both languages. 6 months after we met, I asked her to marry me. We were at that same cafe where we first talked, and I'd arranged with her co-worker to bring out the ring with her coffee order. It was cheesy maybe, but her eyes went bright with tears and she said yes before I could even finish my rehearsed speech. We married 3 months later in a small ceremony at a resort outside the city. Her family came mother, sister, aunts and uncles I'd met briefly before. They welcomed me warmly, spoke to me in careful English, seemed genuinely happy that Poi had found someone who made her smile. I paid the sin sod without resentment, 40,000 baht in a ceremonial bowl, because it felt like respect instead of transaction. It felt like tradition, like investment in our future, like proof I was serious about building a life with her. Everything gleamed with possibility. I was working remotely, earning good money, living in a beautiful city with a woman I loved who seemed to love me back. We talked about the future, maybe starting a business together, maybe having kids in a few years, maybe splitting time between Thailand and Canada so she could see snow and my parents could know their grandchildren. I'd found the reset button I was desperately searching for, and I'd pressed it, and on the other side was everything I'd been missing. But the seeds of doubt plant themselves in the smallest moments, don't they? It was about 2 months after the wedding. We were having dinner at home, just the two of us, some Netflix show playing in the background that neither of us were really watching. Ploy's phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at it, and her expression shifted, not dramatically, just a micro-expression I wouldn't have caught if I hadn't been looking at her face. She picked up the phone, excused herself to the balcony, and took the call in rapid Thai. I sat there picking at my fried rice, telling myself it was nothing. Privacy is normal. Not every phone call needs to be public. But I could hear her voice through the glass door, low and urgent, and when she came back 15 minutes later, her smile seemed practiced in a way it never had before. "Who was that?" I asked, trying to sound casual instead of paranoid. "Just my cousin," she said. "Some family stuff, nothing important." I believed her because I wanted to believe her. Because doubting her meant doubting everything we'd built, and I wasn't ready to do that. Not yet. But that moment lived in my brain. It moved in, set up furniture, started whispering during the quiet hours. And once you hear that whisper, once you let that seed take root, it's almost impossible to dig it out before it grows into something that chokes everything else. The thing about doubt is that it doesn't announce itself with trumpets and fanfare. It starts small. A phone call taken on the balcony. A screen tilted away when you walk past. A pause before answering a simple question. Individually, these moments mean nothing. They're the static of ordinary life, the background noise of any relationship. But when you start collecting them, cataloguing them in the dark corners of your mind at 3 in the morning when she's sleeping peacefully beside you and you're staring at the ceiling, they begin to form a pattern. Or maybe you force them into a pattern because your brain is wired to find threats, to solve problems, to debug the code until you find the error. That's what started happening to me. I wish I could tell you there was one big moment, one clear sign that justified what came next. But there wasn't. There was just an accumulation. Ploy's phone was always face down on the table now, which maybe meant nothing, except she'd read the same articles I had about screen addiction and notification anxiety. She started taking weekend trips to visit her mother alone, saying her mum was more comfortable speaking Thai about family matters, which made perfect sense, except it also meant I couldn't verify anything she told me about those visits. When I'd ask about her day, her answers got vaguer. "Fine, you know, the usual. Same. She was picking up more Thai-isms in her English, which was natural, except it also felt like she was creating distance, reminding me I was the foreigner who didn't fully understand the language or culture or the conversations happening around me. I started noticing the money, nothing dramatic at first, just checking our bank statements during my insomnia sessions and seeing cash withdrawals I didn't remember authorizing, 3,000 baht here, 5,000 there. When I asked her about them, Ploy always had an explanation. Her brother's motorcycle needed repairs, her grandmother needed medicine. A cousin was getting married and needed help with expenses. Every reason was plausible. Every reason was impossible for me to verify without calling her a liar, and I wasn't ready to do that. But I was ready to doubt. And doubt, once it metastasizes, doesn't care about evidence or fairness, or the fact that you're probably just projecting your own insecurities onto someone who's done nothing wrong. I started doing things I'm ashamed of now, checking her phone when she was in the shower, except it was password protected, and I didn't know the code. Scrolling through Thai visa forums late at night, reading horror stories from expat men who lost everything. Guys whose Thai wives cleaned out bank accounts and disappeared. Elaborate long cons that lasted years. Women who were never in love, just playing a role for financial security. I'd read these stories and tell myself Ploy was different, we were different. Our connection was real. But the voice wouldn't stop. It whispered during dinner when she seemed distracted. It screamed during the night she went out with her girlfriends and came home smelling like cigarette smoke, even though she said she didn't smoke. It built elaborate narratives in my head. Secret boyfriends, double lives, entire realities I wasn't part of. The rational part of my brain knew I was spiraling. I recognized the ugly expat paranoia I used to mock in other foreign men, the ones who treated every Thai woman like a potential scammer, who couldn't imagine being loved for anything except their passport and bank account. I didn't want to be that guy, but I was becoming that guy anyway, one sleepless night at a time. That's when I made the decision that would destroy everything. I ordered hidden cameras online, small ones, the kind marketed for home security, but everyone knows what they're really for. A camera disguised as a phone charger. Another built into a wall clock. They arrived in discreet packaging from a store in Bangkok, and I hid them in my desk drawer like contraband, which is exactly what they were evidence of my failing trust. My corroding faith in the person I'd promised to love and honour. I installed them on a Friday, when Ploy went to visit her mother in Lamphun for the weekend. My hands shook the entire time. I felt sick, physically nauseous, but I kept telling myself I needed to know. I needed proof. I was protecting myself. I was being smart instead of naive. All the rationalizations we use when we know we're doing something unforgivable, but we're going to do it anyway. The phone charger camera went on the shelf in the living room with a clear view of the couch and kitchen. The clock went in the bedroom. I downloaded the app, tested the feeds, made sure everything worked. Then I sat in my condo surrounded by my surveillance equipment and wondered what the hell had happened to me. How I'd gone from lonely software developer looking for connection to suspicious husband spying on his own wife. For the first few days, the footage showed nothing remarkable. Ploy doing laundry, watching Thai soap operas on the couch, video calling with her mother, their conversation in rapid Thai. I couldn't understand, but their faces showing nothing but normal family warmth, making herself lunch, dancing alone in the kitchen to some pop song on her phone, completely unself-conscious, looking happy in a way that made my chest ache. I felt simultaneously relieved and disgusted with myself. Relieved because maybe I'd been paranoid, maybe everything was fine, maybe I could delete the footage and uninstall the cameras and we could go back to normal. Disgusted because I'd violated her privacy, crossed a line I could never uncross, become exactly the kind of controlling foreigner I despised. But I didn't delete anything. I kept watching, because once you start down that road, once you've already committed the violation, the sunk cost fallacy kicks in. You've already done the terrible thing, might as well see it through. Then came Tuesday afternoon. I was at a co-working space near Taipei Gate, pretending to work, but mostly refreshing the camera feed on my phone every few minutes like an addiction I couldn't break. Around 2 p.m, I saw Ploy come into the living room and settle on the couch with her laptop. She made a video call. I couldn't see the screen, but I could see her face, and I could hear her voice. She was speaking Thai. Fast, animated Thai with her full range of expression, laughing, sighing, making faces I recognized from our private moments together. I didn't understand 90% of what she was saying, but I caught certain words. Farang. The Thai word for foreigner. My name, Marcus, pronounced with her accent. And then a phrase I'd learned meant tired or exhausted. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I pulled out my earbuds, turned up the volume, and started the screen recording feature. 23 minutes of conversation I couldn't understand but knew in my gut was about me, about us, about something I wasn't supposed to hear. I left the co-working space and went to a cafe. Ordered coffee. I didn't drink. Sent the audio file to one of those translation services that charges by the minute. Paid extra for rush processing. Sat there with my phone face down on the table, my leg bouncing with anxiety, waiting for the translation to come through. It arrived 40 minutes later. A document with timestamps and English text that would rewrite everything I thought I knew about my marriage. The conversation was with her younger sister. They were talking about Ploy's life, her marriage, her feelings. And with each line I read, something inside me crumbled. Her sister asked how she was doing, how things were with her Farang husband. Ploy sighed. I remembered that sigh from the video, the way her shoulders dropped. She said Marcus was kind, a good man. Never hurt her, never raised his voice, always respectful. But then she said something that stopped my breathing. It's exhausting, the translation read. The performance. He always wants to talk about feelings, always needs reassurance, always asking if I'm happy, if I love him, if everything's okay. I can't just exist. I have to constantly prove I care. Her sister said something sympathetic. Ploy continued. I married him because we needed stability after Papa's debts. You know that. Marcus seemed safe, kind, someone who would help family, who wouldn't abandon us. And he is those things. I do care about him. But I'm not in love with him. Not the way he is with me. I perform it well enough, I think. But it's tiring, Annie. So tiring. The conversation went on. Her sister asked if she was going to leave. Ploy said not yet. Maybe in a year or two, when she'd saved enough money. Maybe she'd go to Singapore, try to start over, find work that used her degree instead of just being someone's wife. She said she felt guilty, but also trapped. That Marcus's love felt like a cage made of kindness, and she didn't know how to escape without destroying him. There's no other man, she told her sister. I'm not cheating. I'm just not in love. And I don't know how to tell him that without breaking his heart. I sat in that cafe reading and rereading the translation until the words blurred. The world didn't explode. There was no dramatic revelation of infidelity, no secret boyfriend, no elaborate con. Just a woman trapped in a transaction she never fully wanted, performing affection for security, counting the days until she could afford her own freedom. The worst part was that one understood her. In that terrible, clarifying moment, I understood completely. She'd needed financial stability. I'd needed emotional rescue. We'd both called it love, because that was easier than admitting we were two lonely people using each other to fill different voids. I didn't confront her that day. I went home and acted normal, which was its own kind of performance now. We ate dinner together, watched TV. She asked about my day, and I said it was fine, and she smiled and squeezed my hand twice. I'm here, I see you. Except now I knew that gesture was part of the script she'd written for herself, a line she'd rehearsed so many times it looked natural. Over the next week, I watched more footage. Each clip added layers of painful context. I saw her exhaustion when she thought no one was looking, collapsing on the couch after I left for the gym, her face slack with relief at having a few hours alone. I saw her practicing English phrases in the mirror. I love you too, babe, with different inflections, trying to find the one that sounded most genuine. I saw her on the phone with her mother speaking rapidly in Thai, and when I paid for another translation, I learned they were discussing how much longer Ploy should stay married before it seemed respectable to leave. And I saw her cry. Once, alone in our bedroom, sitting on the edge of the bed with her face in her hands, sobbing in a way I'd never seen her cry in front of me. I paid to translate that phone call too. She was talking to her sister again. I'm trying, she said through tears. I'm really trying to love him the way he loves me. But I can't manufacture feelings that aren't there. And every day I pretend I feel more like a liar, more like I'm stealing from him. He deserves someone who loves him for real, not someone who's just grateful for his money and his kindness. That broke me in a different way than the first conversation, because she wasn't a villain. She wasn't even really lying, not in the way I'd imagined. She was just a person trying to survive her own circumstances, making compromises between duty and desire, trapped in a role she'd accepted out of necessity and couldn't figure out how to escape. And I'd built a fantasy and called it love. I'd wanted rescue and romance and proof that I was worthy of being chosen. And I'd found a woman who needed security and saw in me someone safe enough to perform affection for. Neither of us had been entirely honest. Neither of us was entirely wrong. The reckoning came on a Sunday morning. Ploy was making breakfast, humming to herself, the morning light coming through the kitchen window making her look peaceful and beautiful. I watched her from the doorway and felt nothing but sadness for her, for me, for what we'd tried to build on foundations of mutual need instead of mutual truth. I asked her to sit down. She looked concerned, that micro-expression of worry she could never quite hide. I pulled out my laptop and showed her the cameras, showed her the footage, played her the recordings with the translations on screen. I expected anger, shouting, accusations of violation and betrayal. But Ploy just got very quiet. She read the translations with her hand over her mouth. Then she started crying, not dramatic sobs, just steady tears tracking down her cheeks. Why? She asked finally. Why did you need to spy on me? Because I was scared, I said. Because I felt you slipping away, and I didn't know how to hold on, except by trying to catch you in a lie. We sat there in our kitchen that had witnessed so many performed domestic moments, and we finally told each other the truth. She admitted everything the recordings had revealed. I admitted I'd felt the distance growing but been too afraid to ask about it directly, too afraid of the answer I might get. She asked what I expected to find. I told her the truth I didn't know. Some dramatic affair, maybe. Some concrete betrayal I could point to and say, this is why it hurts. This is why I'm not enough. But there was no concrete betrayal. Just two people who'd married for the wrong reasons and called it the right thing. Just loneliness meeting necessity. And neither of us brave enough to admit it, until secret recordings forced the conversation we should have had months ago. We separated within a week, no fighting, no legal battles, just a quiet dissolution of something that had never been quite real. I paid for her to take a professional development course in Bangkok, a certification in hospitality management she'd mentioned wanting. I helped her move her things out, helped her find a small apartment near her sister. On the last day, standing in our half-empty condo, she hugged me and said she was sorry. I told her I was sorry too, and we both meant it. I'm back in Vancouver now. Different apartment, same rain on the windows, same city that never really felt like home. But I'm different, or trying to be. I learned things in Thailand I couldn't have learned anywhere else, and they weren't the lessons I expected. I learned that love can't be surveilled into existence, that suspicion is a poison that kills even genuine connection. I learned that you can violate someone's privacy and find exactly what you were looking for, and still be completely wrong about what it means. I learned that the person you're with might be just as lost as you are, just as scared, just using different tools to manage the same fundamental loneliness. Ploy wasn't a villain, I wasn't a victim. We were just two people trying to solve our separate problems with each other, and it didn't work, and that's sad, but also just human. I crossed lines I can never uncross. I turned love into surveillance and surveillance into truth, and the truth was that neither of us was who the other person needed. I don't know where Ploy is now. We don't talk, but I hope she's in Singapore or wherever she dreamed of going. I hope she found work that makes her proud and relationships that don't require performance. I hope she forgave me for the cameras, for the violation, for loving her so desperately it became its own form of violence. And I hope I learned to stop treating relationships like systems to debug, partners like problems to solve. Sometimes the person you're with is just as lost as you are, and no amount of monitoring or controlling or evidence gathering will change that. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is let go, even when everything in you wants to hold tighter. That's the lesson Thailand taught me. Not about Thai women or expat life or cultural differences. About myself. About what I'm capable of when fear overtakes trust. About the difference between being loved and being needed, and why I'd settled for one when I desperately wanted the other. I don't have a happy ending to offer you. Just the truth of what happened when I secretly recorded my Thai wife and found something more complicated than betrayal. Just the knowledge that sometimes you get exactly what you were looking for and it still breaks you, because the real problem was never them, it was you all along. So that's Marcus's story, a software developer from Vancouver who went to Thailand looking for a reset button on his life and found instead a mirror that showed him exactly who he'd become. A man so afraid of abandonment that he sabotaged the one relationship that might have had a chance if he'd just trusted it. A man who learned the hard way that love built on need instead of choice will always collapse under its own weight eventually. There are no villains here, just Ploy, trying to help her family and survive her circumstances, making compromises between duty and desire that millions of people make every day. Just Marcus, lonely and desperate for proof he was worthy of being chosen, willing to cross any line to protect himself from the pain he'd been running from his entire life. The real tragedy isn't that the marriage ended, it's that it was probably doomed from the start, built on foundations of mutual need instead of mutual truth. And neither of them was brave enough or aware enough to admit it until secret cameras forced a conversation that should have happened before they ever said I do. If you're watching this and you recognize yourself in Marcus's story, if you felt that creeping paranoia, that urge to check phones and install cameras and find proof of the betrayal you're sure is coming, I want you to ask yourself what you're really afraid of. Because most of the time, it's not actually betrayal. It's the possibility that you're not enough, that love is conditional, that the person you're with might leave if they had the choice. And here's the thing Marcus learned too late. When you treat love like something that needs to be monitored and controlled, you kill it. You turn it into performance and surveillance and proof, and what gets lost is the actual connection, the genuine vulnerability, the possibility of being seen and chosen anyway. Ploy wasn't wrong for marrying someone she didn't love the way he loved her. She was trying to survive, trying to help her family, making the best choice she could from limited options. Marcus wasn't wrong for wanting to be loved genuinely. He was just wrong about the methods, wrong to think cameras could reveal truth, when the real truth was, he'd never asked the hard questions out loud, never risked the vulnerability of saying, I feel you pulling away, talk to me, tell me what's real. So if you're in Thailand or anywhere else, building a relationship across cultures and languages and economic realities, please learn from Marcus's mistake. Trust or walk away. Communicate or accept you're building on sand. But don't surveil. Don't spy. Don't turn the person you love into a suspect in a crime that hasn't been committed. Because even when you find what you're looking for, even when the cameras show you the truth, it won't feel like winning. It'll feel like Marcus felt sitting in a cafe reading translations of his wife, admitting she never loved him, realizing he'd violated someone's privacy, searching for proof of a betrayal that wasn't even happening the way he imagined. The truth was more complicated, more human. And it broke him anyway. Leave a comment if this resonated. Share your stories. And remember, the person you're with is just as scared and lost and trying as you are. Sometimes that's enough, sometimes it isn't. But you'll never know unless you're brave enough to ask, out loud, with your own voice, instead of hiding behind cameras and translations and the illusion of control. Thanks for watching, Bargirl Baddies. We'll see you in the next one.